because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like myself. So if I could be all these other people, I wouldn't have to deal with me.
Welcome to the Juggling the Chaos of Recovery podcast, where we focus on health and wellness and overcoming all types of addictions. You're in the right place if you're a mom, dad, sibling, or caregiver who has a loved one who is or was struggling with an eating disorder or any other kind of addiction. In a time where everything seems heavy, I'm here to bring you a very real, yet lighthearted take on what the heck we're all supposed to do with our lives while we care for our loved ones who are struggling. One thing holds true throughout it all. You can't juggle the chaos without smiling. At least a little bit. Well, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moira Gorski. So glad you are back here. You know, there's a new place that some of us are hanging out called Clubhouse. And my guest today is somebody that I found, I met on Clubhouse in one of those rooms that we were talking about podcasting and having an impact with our podcast. So today, Dustin is joining me today. I'm really excited to bring him to you to share his story and really, most importantly, what he's up to now based on what he learned through his story of struggle and addiction in the past. So Sean, welcome to my podcast today.
Hi, Moira. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are here. Glad to make that connection. Clubhouse is a pretty cool place to hang out these days, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of real organic connections are being made there. A lot of real conversations are taking place, like meaningful conversations, not just surface level stuff. I mean, some people in there are getting deep. And, you know, I mean, I've heard a number of people cry on Clubhouse, including myself. And so I really feel like that's what society across the world is really lacking and why it's taken off so fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that what's interesting about it, too, is if, you know, you listeners don't know about it. I mean, it's a virtual place that you can go to through your phone, but nobody sees you. So you have your little, whatever it's called, the avatar, your little profile picture. And then they just hear you speak. And I just think there's some type of like safety in that. Like we can see each other now in recording, but when people listen to the podcast, nobody sees us, at least with mine at this point. But I think I like to record this way so I can see you while we're chatting, even though the audience can't at this point. But I think there is something to be, you know, in that, well, anonymity, or again, that safety of people not having to see what I look like. It's almost like The Voice, you know, in some way, you know, that, hey, I want to, they hear your song and your voice, and that's all they're focusing on. So I think in Clubhouse, we're focusing on what that person is really saying and that content they're bringing and that connection and that openness and things like that. I've found the same thing, some really neat connections there.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a vetting process, right? Because it's really, I mean, you can speak about whatever you want, but if you're really listening, you can literally hear when somebody is smiling. You know, it's weird, but you can hear when somebody's smiling. You can hear when somebody it's just through the intonation or different sounds that are made. And that's the kind of cues that we, as a species, that's what we tune into and what we can tell. So we can tell authenticity just through listening to somebody and, you know, their message. And if you hear them enough, you can start to get whether or not they're real or not, you know. And sometimes when people just come through super authentic and just tell raw stories and, you know, and they start, I don't know, to me, it's the whole process goes, okay, I listen to you. Oh my God, I really resonate with what you're saying. So now I'm going to go to your profile and I'm going to look there and I'm going to see, okay, what's this person about? And if it matches up and I'm like, oh wow, I want to go further, then I'll go to your Instagram. And so it's almost like a 3 to 4 point authentication process before you actually go and follow and subscribe to them. And that's really organic, which is not what you get on the other platforms, because you just see something and you're like, oh, I would follow you. You got pretty things and shiny stuff all over the place. And most of the time they're really not there because they identify or really resonate with what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I've taken a little bit of a break from it just because of some, my mom's in failing health, and I was sitting in the hospital getting all these notifications. I'm like, okay, I gotta turn Clubhouse away for just a little bit until a little bit different time. But again, it's an interesting platform. I listened to a couple of podcasts about it before I jumped on, just so I could just really understand it a little bit more. But yeah, I do encourage people, if you have an iPhone. My brother's here, and I was talking to him about Clubhouse. He goes, "Yeah, I got to jump on." I said, "No, dude, you got an Android, so you can't get on just yet. Maybe sometime."
Too bad for you.
That's right. Sorry about that. But anyway, back to the purpose of the podcast of sharing stories and hope and things like that. You have quite a story and where you've been. And as I always say, let's start with the story, but not all of it, not all of those, the down and the dirty and all of that. But certainly, the reason why you feel like you started to struggle and started to grab onto things that were not so good for you. And really importantly, how you got out of that or got yourself to a point where you wanted something different than the struggle where you were.
I'll give you the condensed version.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd be here for 3 hours.
That's correct.
So basically, I grew up in a broken home. My father was an abusive alcoholic. There was a lot of fighting going on. There was physical abuse I heard, but I never really, I never saw it or don't remember it. And then, when I was growing up, like when I was, I think 7 is really when I started getting in trouble because I was angry about the situation. Plus my parents were using me to get back at each other. And I'd go to my dad's and I'd, hear about how horrible my mom was and, vice versa. And so I was just angry about the whole situation. First time I really got in trouble was in preschool when I got kicked out for throwing a rock. It was a dirt clod, but I didn't realize there was a rock inside of it. And I threw it at somebody and hit a little girl in the face. And so I got expelled from there. And then that was the beginning of me becoming a latchkey kid, which for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's, you basically take yourself to school and home and really have the run of the home and no supervision and no discipline or anything. That was a horrible idea. And whoever came up with that should be incarcerated because it really spawned a whole generation of like unruly kind of kids, including myself. And so that lasted all the way through. I mean, I got expelled from 3 different junior highs. I came back and, I was always in trouble, from the very young age. And my first time I did drugs was I'd found some marijuana in my mom's room because she took away my Walkman and she was never there. So, I would just, all right, take it away from me. I'm going to go rummage through your stuff and find it. I found some marijuana in a bong and somehow I knew what to do with it. And I did. And I jumped on my skateboard and we lived on a really steep hill. And I would never, ever think about riding my skateboard all the way down it without stopping because I'd get speed wobbles and jump off and get scared. And I went all the way down this hill and didn't fall, didn't jump off, didn't do anything. And so that was the first kind of like, I don't know, experience with it. Was like, oh my God, it takes away your fear and I can be this whole other person on this. And so I didn't do it for a while after that, but that was my first experience with it. Then alcohol at a really young age, and then that on and off in junior high. But when I got into high school, all my friends were doing something and they would never let me try it. They would disappear into a room and I was the youngest one. And so I would be stuck out there like, well, all right, well, what's going on? And so it really created this thing where, well, I want to do what they're doing. And at some point, I think it was when I was 16, and nobody would give it to me still. And that was methamphetamine. Back then it was called crank. And I knew that my step aunt, because my dad had remarried this other lady who lived down the street from us. And they still lived there, and the sister still lived there. And I knew that they were like kind of tweaker people. And so I started hanging out over there because I wanted to try it. and she was like maybe 13 to 15 years older than me, and I was about 16, and she gave it to me. And so that was the first time I tried it, and everything was downhill from that point on. I ended up in getting given up as a ward of the court because I was incorrigible, doing all kinds of stuff, got in so much trouble. Went to a 16-month group home type residential treatment center for adolescents. Got out, did okay for a little bit, came back home to my mom's, went to my brother's, didn't realize that he was a cross-dresser and was starting that process of becoming transgender. And so that was really difficult for me to deal with. This is a person who we used to play basketball and all these other things with. And so there's one thing there that like kind of threw me for a loop. Got in a fight with her now, and told her I was going to kill her and all those other things. And so I had to come back home to my mom's. Eventually went up to Sacramento, California, where I had run into it again and started a whole life of becoming a drug dealer and selling club drugs, raving, did ecstasy, sold ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, all that stuff. And so now I was really immersed in this like lifestyle. And my dad's a cop too, so that my whole father's side of the family are law enforcement. Even my grandmother, she was the first female police officer in Berkeley, California.
Wow.
Yeah. And so here I am, this kid that's gone completely the opposite direction of them, living in the same city as my father. And I remember having a conversation with him, and I was telling him, I was like, look, I'm doing all these things. If my name comes across your desk at some point, because he was a fingerprint latent expert, so he was a criminologist, I said, I don't expect you to look the other way. Do what you got to do. And so, I mean, that's kind of like the relationship that we had. I mean, he wanted to be a dad, but I wouldn't, and I wanted to be rebellious and live this life that I thought was, really all it was is I was trying to get out of working a real job. And so I was anything that I could possibly do to get out of doing what I should be doing, which was a pattern since I was a kid. Everything that my mom would always tell me, if you would spend half as much time just doing the right thing as you do trying to get out of doing the right thing, you would probably be a lot further in wherever it is you're trying to go. And so that's kind of how it went. And I ended up getting a stripper pregnant because that's where I spent a lot of my time. I was very manipulative with women at this point and just using people. I used people to gain things. If you didn't serve a purpose in my life, you probably wouldn't be in it, right? And so I didn't look at people as relationships. I looked at them as stepping stones to get me where I needed to go. And that really formed that narcissistic kind of behavior and patterns and stuff that we see a lot today. And that just continued, and it just got more and more and more and more as time went on. And I ended up moving to Vegas with said stripper because I got her pregnant. And the only reason that we moved was because I'd ran into somebody or got into it with somebody who the next time I saw them, it was going to either be me being dead or him. And I was like, well, it's not going to be me because I'm not going to be here because I'm sure he's going to be the one that's going to kill me. And so I said, well, maybe we should move to Vegas. You're a stripper and there's plenty of strip clubs there. And that would be good for me because I wouldn't have to go to work and have to worry about anything. And so that's what we did. And it got there, I think my daughter was born in 2000. So we got there probably in 99. Got a job, was working, periodically, but I was still drinking because I didn't know anybody that had drugs or where to even get them. So I was getting drunk often. It was always some sort of substance that I was going to. If I couldn't get a hold of the one that I wanted, then I'd find something else to check out with. Yeah, that lasted for a while. My daughter was born in 2000. When she was 18 months old, I ended up getting a DUI, and we had separated at this point, but I was still in contact with him. And because I had done something, I wrecked my ex's car. She let me use it to drop her off at the airport. She went back for Christmas at her family in the Bay Area, and I totaled it. Ran right into a light pole because I was on GHB, and so fell asleep at the wheel. Boom, hit it. And there's a whole other story that goes along with that one, but I mean that's the gist of it. So she had my rights terminated, and I had gotten a DUI, got served. Not on that, I got a DUI on something else. Had got served while I was incarcerated, waiting to get arraigned and all that other stuff for her to have the parental rights terminated, and I didn't contest it. I just abandoned my daughter. She was 8 months old or 18 months old, and I just figured, well, she would be better off with her anyways, and at least this way I don't have to pay child support. That's how I looked at it. Right or wrong, indifferent, whatever. That's where I was mentally at that time. And I spent the next, I would say, I moved to Phoenix, tried to do a geographical. Things are going to change if I go to a different location, right? Stayed drunk there the whole time for about 6 months. Came back to Vegas, moved in with some friends that I'd worked with before. They left, moved back to California, and I ended up in a roach-infested weekly in North Las Vegas. I didn't know what to do. I was like, man, what am I gonna, what's happening? And I hadn't been using meth at this point, but I'm still drinking and maybe smoking some weed every here and there. And I go, well, let's go back to what you know. Go apply to be a bouncer at a strip club. You've done that before. Get back with a woman that you can use and manipulate to find shelter, right? And I did. And what ended up happening was she was a meth addict, and the first time I even went over to her house to hang out with her, I'm at the door and she's sitting there smoking, rolling a pipe and smoking meth. And I'm just like, walk away, walk away, walk away. Don't go in there. Don't go in there. Don't go in there. As I'm walking straight to her and took it. I knew better, but I wasn't strong enough to say no. And so from that point on, I started a criminal enterprise. I started selling meth. I started, employing people to go and do smash and grab robberies and businesses and trading it for drugs. I ended up basically selling to the wrong guy I'd been dealing with for a year. He got busted, turned a CI on me. I sold to this confidential informant 5 times. I was being surveilled. They were, basically watching me for a while. I knew something was going on, though. I just had this feeling that my time was up. So I got rid of all of the firearms that I had, illegal ones that I was getting from, them breaking into people's homes and selling them to me. And probably like 4 days later, I got raided by the SWAT team. And up to this point, I've almost died 5 times. I had 4 times. The 5th time is when I got raided, but the 4 times prior to that, 3 of them were overdoses. One was the accident, and this last one was the raid, because I had a firearm. I had one left, and I thought somebody was like, when they came in, they flash banged it and they threw concussion grenades in, and I wasn't in the room that they focused it all in, right? And I was in the back room, so it didn't affect me at all. I thought somebody was doing a drive-by, honestly. And I was counterfeiting hundreds at the time, so I was working on one on the computer screen, right, in the room. And so I open the door, I come out, and I had this gun in my hand, and I go out the hallway, and there was a huge, remember those big screen TVs that weighed like 3,000 pounds and were 6 feet tall back in the day? I had one of those that were in front of the door. So the door wouldn't open up all the way, but I saw the shields. So immediately I had the gun in my hand and I saw the shields, and I'm like, oh, and I ditched the gun behind the TV and in one motion jumped and laid down with my hands on my head. They never found that gun because I was smarting off to them. when they threw one of the flashbangs in, I had a double pane glass window with it tinted on the inside. It went through the first pane and bounced back on them and blew up on them. And then the police dog bit one of the officers because it got scared. So they were pissed as soon as they came in anyways. I started mouthing off and they picked me up while I'm hogtied and just rammed my head into the TV, pushed the TV up over the gun. They never found it. Which would have got me 5 more years because the serial numbers were filed off, and that's just an automatic 5-year charge. So,
you know what? Apparently, there's a reason that you made it through all this, because it like plays like a movie, right? Or like one of those CSI or whatever those shows are that we watch, that it's just on, and like, how does this person survive? But I mean, you're here today, speaking to me, and the sign behind you that others can't see is like nowhere to go but up. I mean, come on, right? I mean, what a great, that couldn't be more appropriate for you to name your podcast and your mission and to help others, is because I don't know, you got nowhere else to go. But
yeah, I started from 0 3 times in my life. And so that's why I named it Nowhere to Go But Up, because I mean, shit, 3 times, like who better to talk about coming from nothing and rising back up than me, and in my own life. And so I went to prison. There's a lot more involved in that, but I don't think we're going to have time to get to all that. So I ended up going to prison, did 3 years federal, 3 years state, or not 3 years, 18 months state, 18 months federal. And if you want to know more about how all that came about, you probably just check out my show. There's a lot of stuff in there that will explain that. I got out in 2006, didn't learn my lesson. I still had more to put on my resume. Let's just say 2008 happened. I got involved in my union that I'm currently still in as an apprentice in 2007. 2008 hit the financial crisis and we all got put out of work pretty much. And I was getting unemployment, a lot of time on my hands, found the meth again, had gotten married when I got out as well, for all the wrong reasons. And then as soon as that happened, I found what I was looking for. Somebody hooked me up with somebody that was willing to teach me how to do the crimes that I was wanting to do, which was credit card fraud, learning how to buy the information online through the dark web and making my own credit cards and using them. And so along with IDs and everything else. So, I mean, I've always been super intelligent. Yeah. I would just apply it in the wrong ways. Right. I've always been a natural leader, but I led people in the wrong direction and to serve myself instead of serving others. Right. And so those are the lessons that, you need to learn early, or else you're going to continue fumbling in life. When you're just serving yourself, you usually things don't happen for you the way you want them to. Or sometimes they do, but when you're going in that direction, they don't. And so in 2010, I went AWOL for my marriage for 3 months. I just disappeared, turned my phone off, and was in the world of crime. Didn't answer my phone, didn't communicate until everything was okay. Well, all of this is going away now. I have nowhere else I need to come back home. And so I crawl back expecting, my charm and all the stuff that usually works. Oh, it's going to be different this time. I promise. I'm so sorry. Please take me back. Can you? And she wasn't buying it because she was an addict too, right? An alcoholic in recovery. And so the point where it started going up was I had done 2 violations. I got violated twice. Once I went to a 90-day treatment center, which I bullshitted my way through the whole thing and was still using while I was in there. And that's a whole nother story. I had another dirty and mind you, I'm on federal supervised release while I'm committing all of these crimes. Right. And so doing all the credit card stuff. And I think it was on New Year's Day. And I can't remember if I think it was 2010, New Year's Day, January 1st. I went to a Best Buy to do something, and I'd been up for 3 days, had no business going anywhere, doing anything, and got caught. I had been using people's IDs and using people's information for so long that when I got arrested, I had and they found I ditched my my wallet, but they retraced my steps as I came out of the store, and they found it. I would have almost got away with it because I could repeat the person's information that I was using flawlessly from their social security number, where they live, their ID number, their phone number, everything. Like I was this person, but not really. And so they were about to let me go, and the guy found my wallet, and there's 7 different IDs with 7 different credit cards and to match it. And when they asked me, okay, so who are you? Um, I drew a blank. I'm like, I don't know. Like I couldn't think of my own social security number. I couldn't remember it because I've been using so many other people's for so long. And I think the reason why identity theft was so why I gravitated towards it, because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like myself. So if I could be all these other people, I wouldn't have to deal with me. And so that was one thing that came to mind as I look back on everything. So anyways, I did a violation, 90 days in a place, but the turning point for me is that I was in a high-speed chase with my ex because I was trying to convince her that, things were going to be different. Everything around me, like the footing around me was getting pulled out from underneath me to where I was like, oh my God, I don't have nowhere, I'm going to fall and I don't have nowhere to land. Right. And so it really became real for me at that point. I had to turn myself in for in 6 weeks. So I'm chasing her down the highway during rush hour. I'm weaving in and out of traffic, being really destructive. And she could see that in the rearview mirror, and she immediately pulled over and she's like, dude, you're going to kill somebody or yourself. You need to stop. And all I remember about that is that for some, like everything just came crashing down on me at that one point, and I just fell to my knees and started crying uncontrollably in my hands. And I just came to the realization that all of your manipulations and all of the things that you try to do and everything just came tumbling down at that point. And I literally was above myself watching myself, and I was like, dude, you look so pathetic right now. Like who are you? Like, what are you doing? And from that point on, I stopped doing drugs. I stopped doing the meth because I knew I had to turn myself in, and I used that as the reason to stop because I didn't want to be kicking while I was in there. I was going to a facility I'd never been to, which is a county facility, which is a lot more dangerous than a prison because the politics they're not really politics in a jail. And so I quit smoking, quit doing that, did my time, came back out, and was with her still. But I mean, the relationship was shot. I mean, when you treat somebody that way, I mean, basically all she was doing was trying to get me to a point where she can get rid of me.
Yeah.
and so it worked. I started playing adult slow pitch softball, and this is going to sound funny. I stopped hanging out with everybody, stopped doing the drugs, started playing slow pitch softball, started enjoying myself and around people that weren't doing those types of things. I didn't like the league I was playing in, so I said, well, I'm going to start my own league. Made a goal, figured out how to put the pieces together to do it, did it. It was successful, achieved it. And I was like, huh, maybe I'm not a stupid criminal. Maybe I can do something other than just be a manipulative drug addict, loser. And so I'm like,
but you had said before that, you were a leader, right? But you were leading things that, that weren't good, but you had created things before. You had created your credit card and your crimes and all of that stuff that, everybody just heard, but you had those leadership qualities, if you will. You just using it in the wrong way. And it sounds like, from what I just heard, like all of a sudden you created something and you saw that, like, wow, my creativity, my leadership, I can create something that's good, right? And great in value, and that I can feel good about, as opposed to this other crap that I just did for the last how many years.
I couldn't be proud of the other stuff, right? Because my parents couldn't be proud of it. I couldn't go and brag about it and like, hey, look what I did.
Right.
because people would be like, you're a piece of shit. What, you can't brag about that,
Mm-hmm.
And so there was nothing that I could ever, I had this narrative that I'd built in my head because I was always in trouble and always bad. And so here I am, almost like rewriting the track, right? Changing that narrative in my own mind. And I mean, it was a long process. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is still 2010. I'm still in the union. I, started doing that. Then I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna get on I joined the rowing team for the union. So here's another thing that I'm doing that's putting me in a different place, right? Around people that I want to be like, right? And so from there, I got involved as a sergeant at arms in my union, got elected to that, did that for 2 years, got elected again to the executive board and a trustee, did that for 2 more years. And in the interim too, so in the softball world, I was becoming really immersed in that. And so I wanted to become a tournament director and run my own tournaments. Did that, was successful doing that. And so there's all these things where I'm just leveling up, leveling up, leveling up. Oh, I can do this. Well, maybe, let me try this. And it was like this newfound toy, right? Of like, oh, there's this whole other world over here that like I could play around with, you know, and do things. And so it just, from one to the other, to the other, to the other. But all the while, so I ended up in softball, I got hurt, and I ended up in a 7-year opiate addiction that lasted till about 2017, which I could still function versus the meth, I couldn't. But I was still, wrapped around and trying to find pills and deal with the sickness because I took too many and the withdrawal symptoms and all this other thing. So, I mean, that was really kind of keeping me from going. It was keeping me in a certain area, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was still in the union doing all of that. I had, I think in 2018, I had decided to run for a business agent position. So you have to step off of your current roles to to get elected for that one. So that didn't happen. I ended up losing, and that was a gut check because I'd built up this idea of who I was in this union, and elections are based on popularity mostly, not merit. And I'd done everything. Like I had worked so hard to try and get this, and I didn't know that this was going to happen. Then they made a position, and the people at the top were like, we want you in it, and you've done everything. But I was still an asshole, right? I was still arrogant. I was still this person that didn't have humility or was very humble. I let my successes go to my head, and my ego was really
Well,
took over.
yeah, and it sounds like you went back or stayed in that space of serving you, right? And serving your ego and what you wanted as opposed to serving others. And I think when many of us have learned over time that if you can be a servant leader, we can get our needs filled but if we can start by serving others and helping others, then it comes back to us and we get our bucket filled too. But we have to learn to put that focus on serving others instead of our own stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's 2018 right there. I started go back a little bit to like 2015. I'd started the tournaments. I'd started taking teams and sponsoring teams with the money that I made to go to the World Series of softball, which is in Vegas. So we did that 2 years in a row. And then, but all along, my anger, so I'm not using, but my anger issues were flaring out here and there, right? I would try to fight people on the softball field. I would, I actually got suspended for a year from playing because I beat somebody up on the field. And so, and two, I was an abusive person through all my relationships up until my last one with my youngest daughter's mother. Not physically, but I mean, I was a bully. I would, shove her. I would throw her on a bed. I would do, a lot of things that wouldn't get me in trouble, that she couldn't point to and say, look what he did to me. Look, there's proof. And so, I was kind of like a bad person. I was verbally, mentally, emotionally, and borderline physically.
Well, and
And
I kind of hear, or kind of didn't hear, like what I hear with other stories, and that I've featured on this podcast, is that along the way, as people have, gotten clean and sober, or made different choices, they've gone into treatment, but they've gotten some counseling. They've done this, they've done work to kind of peel back the layers, to talk about, like, the notes that I made here, like, those boundaries that you didn't have set for you when you were a latchkey kid, like, dealt with, okay, what did that mean when, I wasn't shown boundaries. So, like, now I have no boundaries in my life. And so, but what I'm, and so you haven't, I'm just making the statement by listening to your story. I didn't hear any, like, okay, I learned what that was all about. And I peeled back the layers to say, okay, that's where my anger is coming through. This is why I didn't want to work for anybody else. This is why I didn't like who I was, that type of thing. And I believe that if we don't deal with, like, we don't peel that stuff back and become vulnerable there and open ourselves up and lay ourselves on the floor and go, okay, so what does this mean? And let me process through this, and let me process through it with you, counselor, or you, treatment center, or you, friend, or you, nature outdoors while you're taking a walk. Help me process through it so I don't repeat it. So I can figure this stuff out so that I can show up differently and thus don't repeat these patterns, which sometimes I don't even know. I'm just pissed off. I'm just, hurting the people around me instead of loving them, those kind of things. That's what it seems like wasn't there, has been missing, was missing,
yeah,
I don't know.
it was missing up until I started the podcast. So I started listening to podcasts probably about, I don't know, 2 years before I started mine. I was listening to Joe Rogan, and I would listen to that 14 hours a day sometimes, because from the time I'm commuting till I'm at work. The trade that I'm in is, usually we're by ourselves. So, I mean, I have my earbuds in, and I'm just listening to content over and over and over again, listening to all his episodes, following the people that, what we do in podcasts, when you listen to them, you hear a guest, oh, wow, I like what they're saying. So you go and go down the rabbit hole on their show. And so there was all these amazing people I started listening to, and my mindset started changing because I'm hearing all this stuff, right? And so just naturally, like, I guess by osmosis, I just start changing my mindset to, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. And I started becoming more self-aware of the things that I was doing and how I was showing up in different things. Losing that election really was a slap in my face, because I'd never really ever put that much into something and didn't get the result that I wanted. And so that was my first really, like, failure in this new world of goal setting and showing up in a responsible way. And that really hurt. It caused it, like, okay, well, here's how I see myself, but then those memes where this is who I am and who I think I am, and then there's how everybody else sees me. And so I really had to take a hard look at that. And I licked my wounds for about a month. I just kind of withdrew from everything for about a month, trying to figure things out. 2020 hit. Well, I started the podcast, I would say, in May of 2019. And it started out as bottoms and life struggles, and letting my guests tell their stories of how they got through it, because I was interested in because I went through the same thing. I didn't want to just outly tell my story. I wanted to be able to relate my story as I'm talking to other people about their stories, right? Like, oh, I relate to that, and this is why. And then they continue, and it's just like a natural conversation that you would have. What I didn't realize is that through so I used to manipulate in a really bad way, but I started leveraging guests. If I was struggling with something like self-sabotage or anger issues or any of these other things that I struggle with, and I would have them on and talk about it. And so the more I would talk about my own situation and my own struggles, it kind of took the power away from them, and it kept my issues in the forefront. So as they were coming up, I was aware of them. And it really wasn't until I learned how the brain sort of worked that the perfect example is that when I struggle with weight and I bounce back and forth all the time, and I have a negative self-talk around my image and how I look sometimes. And one of the things that I did with my ex is she struggled with it too, and that's where if I knew that I couldn't hit her and she pissed me off, I would go directly for one issue that her issues, and I'd beat her up that way. And not saying that it was right, but that's just kind of what I did. And what I realized is when I was attacking her about her weight, I was really attacking me because I was I I struggled with it. I couldn't change it, and I was having a problem changing it, and I didn't like myself because of it. So I projected it onto her, my own hatred for myself.
It's true. I mean, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I've heard that before. I've heard that in my own leadership role in my business. They say when you are bothered by something that somebody else is doing, it's kind of like a reflection on, well, maybe that's you. It's bothering
Mhm.
you in them because you see that in you. And I just have to give again light to what you just said about when you started the podcast and what you do and what you did, because I got to tell you, it's exactly what I've done too. I wanted to shed light into this world of sitting in a space of a mother, a caregiver of somebody that is struggling with an eating disorder. I've recovered from my own, and I wanted to give light to me and like the journey that I've been on, but share stories of hope. And I got to tell you, when I wanted to learn about intuitive eating, I found a gal who's a coach in intuitive eating. I go, let's talk about that. And I would find people, or I do believe that the universe and God of my understanding led me to people that even today, you said that.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's exactly what I do. And it's been like, and I said this on the podcast, like half of the reason why I do this is for me.
Mhm.
And thankfully, and thank God, he sent me people that when I read a passage from a book that I was featuring, I was featuring the authors, the mother and the son in this book the publisher sent it to me and said, hey, would you have him on your podcast? And when I read before I got him on, because I wanted to read the end of it, I'd read most of the book, but I was like, didn't finish it. So I'll read the last couple of pages before I got him on. And the mother said, I've come to believe that addictions are the work of the devil and not of the God that I know. And faith got me through, and on and on and on. And I read that, and that's exactly what I needed to hear on
Mhm.
that day. And that conversation with Laura and Tom Bolt was so healing for me and just what I needed to hear. And I didn't know that I needed to hear that. And I believe
Mhm.
that God knew that on that day I needed that. And so I agree with you. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that you found that you're doing the same type of thing that I am, that
Mhm.
what I hear from you and from, again, you were serving yourself for so long, but you are serving others now. You've chosen to try to help other people and share their stories. But in the meantime, it's coming back to help you. And
Mhm.
because I can say that because I'm in that space that is coming back to help me, because my struggles are not gone. My daughter continues to struggle. I have, a busy life and all the on and on and on. And I continue to be served as I'm serving others. And I think it's worth noting, what we're doing here in this space of trying to help others. In the meantime, it can be healing for us.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different lanes of podcasting, and shows have different reasons why they start them. And I agree. It has been so impactful in my life and me in my self-awareness and realizing why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And by no means am I perfect. I still
Mhm.
struggle. I had a bout of road rage the other day, and I was just like, oh, because it's one of those things. It's like a split second, and I had to really look at like, okay, well, what's going on? I first of all, I didn't kill anybody, and I didn't get in a fight, and I didn't get shot. That's a plus,
Mhm, right.
you know. But here we go again. I take 3 steps forward and 1 step back. And I had to take a look at what was going on in my life at that point. And so, like, there's this impending doom of going back to a job I don't like. There's this, we talked about earlier, my podcast and not growing as fast as I want it to, considering the kind of content that I'm putting out there that should be helpful for everybody. And so there's all these frustrations, and I'm not talking to anybody about it. I'm not being vocal about it. So what is it doing? It's just festering inside, and it just, all of a sudden, what was happening before that point, right? I cut somebody off, not on purpose. I didn't realize it. I didn't see them. And so the guy started started getting on my rear end. And all right, so what started happening? My heart rate started going fast. I started gritting my teeth and getting to that point. So these are things that you have to realize. When that happens, don't let it go to the next point, right? You see the first signs of it, and the immediate would be start talking about stuff that, and don't let in, like a release valve. When you start talking about things, and it's like, a little bit starts going out, and it doesn't get to that point where you blow up on folks. So anyways, there's a lot of that, right? And so in my opinion, the most important thing that I talk about right now is my abusive behavior in the past, because I think that everybody has been touched by somebody who has either been in a relationship and struggled with some sort of abuse as a woman, or even a man, because it comes on both sides, or have a daughter or a friend that has been in a relationship with a narcissistic type of person who is abusive. And so you don't hear very many men coming out and talking about that openly. It's a shameful thing. You usually won't even hear about it unless it's in the four walls of a counselor's office.
Right.
So being that example to other men, like, hey man, yeah, it's shameful and we shouldn't be doing it. But if you don't talk about it, you allow it to continue to have the power over you to not stop it.
Right. Yeah. Silence. Yeah. Silence can be just an acceptance and an allowance of that behavior or that thing. And like you said, when you talk about it, when you give light to it, and this gentleman who I mentioned before we went live, Louis said he wanted to change. He wanted to break the pattern. He wanted to change things for the future. And so you are giving that ability, as you talk about this to other men, you're giving them the power and yourself the power to say, you know what, I'm going to break this cycle. I'm going to break this pattern, and I'm not going to allow it to continue on. And by showing that, hey, I'm going to do it, like you can do it too. And let's change the future for other men, for other women, for other, couples, relationships, for, let's change the future by talking about it so that we can change, cut that.
Change how you show up.
Mm-hmm.
Change how you're showing up in whatever capacity you're in, because if you have that in you, it shows up in all kinds of places, and not just, in your relationships. It was showing up, that's, one thing I didn't mention is that I had progressed so far in my career as a union member and a tradesman, that when I got out of my apprenticeship school 3 months out, I got hired as a superintendent, which is, I went from the lowest to the very highest. And I did that for 18 months, but my anger got me fired. And so, I mean, we don't pay attention to things usually unless it hurts us financially. When you get hurt in the pocket, you're forced to look at it. And so there was one thing. What really actually made me change how I wanted to show up being abusive was, I was in an argument with my ex. There's two instances. I was in an argument, I was in a rage, and I was yelling at her, and my daughter was behind me, and she was probably about 2 years old, and I knew she was there, and I looked back again and she was gone, and that snapped me out of it. And I went looking for her, and she was hiding in the furthest point of the house, like cowering, crying. And so I immediately thought to myself, well, I wonder if that's how I was when my parents were fighting. I wonder if that's me. And,
Yeah.
and so anyways, and then the second time was when we were in a fight in the car. We were going back and forth. We had already split up, but we were trying to take her to go to Santa, right? And we'd done that, and we were leaving, and we just got into an argument about something, and it was just a back and forth where no one was getting anywhere, and it was just the octaves kept going higher, higher, and higher. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she's like, "Stop!" And I look back, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" She knows what's going on. And I'm like, I'm done. That's it. I can't do this anymore. I do not want her growing up thinking that this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And that when she gets into it, when she's older or gets into a situation where she knows she should leave and not, and just in the relationship, that she stays in it because, well, my parents stayed together, you know? And
Mm,
so it was really about her and being an example of what a good man looks like.
mhm.
And I wasn't showing her that. I was showing her the complete opposite. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that went
There's so
into.
many things, right? Yeah, so many things. It's like, and again, I know that the listeners are getting a ton out of this, as I am, and hopefully you are too, as you're processing through this. There are generational, I mean, again, the things that I'm hearing that I've heard before on this podcast is generational patterns that continue on. And again, we do have the power to change that if we choose to show up differently. And sometimes there's kids that come into our lives, or sometimes that friends come into our lives to show us that, or to wake us up to say, you know what, no more. And again, you have the opportunity. And if you're doing it, again, if you're doing it for them, if you're doing it for your daughter, choosing to change, then that's great. Again, if we can put our, it keeps coming back, like if we can put our focus on helping others or other people, then that's a good way to be, to have that humble servant attitude. Then it's a good way to show up in this world.
Yeah, and a lot of opportunities have opened up because of that. I mean, I started a nonprofit organization called, well, it's Nowhere to Go But Up Inc. is the actual what it's under. But I mean, it's, for me, it's, I wanted to start I wanted to help people in my population, guys that are coming out of incarceration and reentering the community, because when I went, there was, I mean, everything changed about me physically. I got healthy physically, and the body looked great and everything else, but I was still toxic, right? And none of the behaviors that got me there changed while I was in there to help me when I got out. And so I was like, all right, well, how can I navigate this, right? How can I help people that go in for short periods of time like myself, who don't qualify for the programming and any of the other stuff? I was in 18 months, basically in one place, and as I got comfortable there, it's time to go to the next stop. And same thing, and people that are incarcerated in prison, there's waiting lists to get into programs. And if you're not there for long periods of time, I think anywhere from 1 to 5 years, there's not a lot for you. And you either have to do it on your own, which none of us has the ability to be self-aware most of the time at that point, because in order to change a behavior, you have to have people calling out the behavior, right?
Right.
And you can't do that in prison. Hey, I want to confront you because I feel like you're manipulative.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is you're going to get a shank in the side.
Right. Well, and my parents, bless their hearts, they had a heart to, well, just to help a lot of people. And later on in their life, they started to be involved with prison ministry and prison fellowship, which is an organization. And they did seminars. They taught Bible studies in the local jail here on Sunday nights. And, I know enough and they started a halfway house here in the town that I live in. And, and I saw the work that they did and heard stories, and that, just like you said, there aren't, like, you come out and you haven't figured out, like, you haven't worked on the stuff on the inside, and you hang out with the same people, like the same stuff's going to happen, and you're going to get thrown back in. That recidivism rate just continues to increase. But again, with you, when you came out finally, I mean, you found some other groups to hang with. And like you said earlier, that you were around others that were doing things that you wanted to do in a good way, right? In a positive way and things like that. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing to create that environment to give men a place to come to, a place to, come to, if you will, with air quotes, or just to be a part of that's better and different and offers hope for redemption, for recovery, for moving on into a better tomorrow than today.
Yeah, well, specifically as I was doing my market research in the area, talking to different probation supervisors, managers, other community-based organizations, that the need in my county in particular was for transitional age youth, males, 18 to 24-year-olds. And so where they haven't really gotten to the point where they've ruined their life and are doing serious time yet, and their brains haven't developed fully yet. And so there is that opportunity to get in there and show them a different way. And so my goal is to provide a housing facility that will keep them for a year to a year and a half and allow them to, like, I've already got a program, self-leadership training program that I'm going to be implementing in there. I'm going through the process right now of becoming a trainer in that. And also, all of the elements that you're going to need, even from people that I've had on my show, because once you're on my show, you're now in my network, right? And if you're a coach or, somebody that talks about self-sabotage, anger, all of these things, now you're going to be put on my sort of pinwheel of slices of different things that we're going to have, Zoom seminars on, or presentations that they're going to have to sit in and listen to and maybe ask questions, and pertain it to themselves. I'll be teaching content creation in there as well. One of the most pivotal things for me having a podcast was realizing that it gave me my voice back, and that, things that I had to say, or people that I wanted to talk to, it actually gave me a lot of self-esteem and confidence that I could carry on a conversation with a super intelligent person, even though I may not be as intelligent as them, but I could still volley with them in a conversation and ask questions and figure things out. And so I think that was really important in my transformation. And so I want to teach them that and give them the opportunity to have a show connected to the program where they can start getting their own guests on and going through that process on their own and figuring it out and giving them a skill. I mean, that's a skill. Content creation is a skill, especially now in the world of digital world that we're all living in, right? And I was also able to link up with another community-based organization that's going to allow me to start teaching now this for their program to 16 to 21-year-olds. And this is women, girls and boys. So, I'm really in this space of where I just want to serve other people, and, hopefully, maybe I'll blow up, maybe I won't, who cares at this point, as long as I'm doing better. And not, like, my main thing is look, let's just get through today and not have to do anything that's going to have to make me apologize for it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the most important goal in my day, right?
Yeah.
Because when I'm showing up like that, then it's not about me and it's about everybody else. Mm-hmm. and how I can serve them. When I get into that anger mindset and don't talk about it, then it becomes about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, a big word for me last year was surrender. And I continue to bring that up as I get into a space too of, like, frustration and why aren't things going this way? And why isn't this growing? And why aren't, who's even listening, and all of that stuff in my whole life. And it continues to be a struggle at times, because I'm like a go-getter and I just move forward and I get things done and I success and all of this stuff. But I had to figure out, and I still continue to figure out, like, the difference between surrendering and giving up and quitting, because I'm not a quitter and I don't give up. But there's something to be said for surrender and saying, okay, I don't know. Like, I have to give up that control of having to know where everything is going to be and what this is like, what's the purpose here, and why am I supposed to do this? Like, just giving that up and saying, hey, I'm just going to follow we met, and I met people on Matchmaker, and I meet people here and there. And it's like, I don't know. I even said, I've shared on this podcast before, and I shared it a couple of days ago with someone, that as I was struggling and on my knees in my kitchen going, don't take my daughter, and like, what is going on? And I'm so scared about everything going around me, and mainly my daughter, who appeared to be killing herself. I started to listen to the voices in my head, if you would. But it was more like when I started to slow down and meditate in the morning, or just pray or take some quiet time, I started to think of somebody, Sean or Joan or Susie or whatever. And I decided to call him, like, or text him, like, hey, Susie, hey, Sean, what's up? I've been thinking about you today. I had no idea why, but I just felt like I should do that. And things started to unfold. And not that it was like, oh, wow, here's a great success of my business. It was just those connections, and something maybe one word that I needed to hear that day, or invitation to go someplace, or whatever the case is. But that was like that surrender, like, okay, I'm just going to let you lead, something else lead me, instead of me trying to be so gripping so tight on that control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's having to control things, because a lot of times, especially for me in my environment when I was growing up, I had no control of it. I had no control over my parents and what they were doing and how they were impacting me. I had no control over a lot of different things, and I didn't think that I could control it, right? And as I started going through my whole process, and realizing that you have to surrender to win, which is a really foreign concept to me too, because I was a team sports kind of guy. And I didn't understand that, okay, well, if I surrender, I'm going to win, meaning, like Bruce Lee has, the art of fighting without fighting. Become water, you know just just let it take you or inform you how it's going to, and be a conduit of good instead of conduit of bad, right?
Yeah. I mean, so good, so good. And again, I feel like, I hope that our conversations continue. I commend you again for the work that you're doing, and for from where you've come and where you're sitting today, and that you have that look into the future, that's so much brighter, and you want to offer that to other people. I think that's extremely commendable. Tell people, you've said it a little bit, but tell people how they can find you, where they can find you.
Okay, so the website is going to be live here pretty soon. I went backwards with it. I didn't do that in the beginning, and it's just now starting to come on board. So that's going to be nowhere to go but up pod.com. If you want to find where I'm at right now, you can go to Linktree, which is linktr.ee/ nowhere to go but up. All of the places that you can donate, sites, if you want to help my cause or whatever it is that I'm doing, if you want to find my social media channels, merchandise, anywhere that I'm at and the show is in that link tree right now. When the website goes live, all of that information you can find it over there as well. And there are actually going to be a page for the mission statement of the nonprofit and everything that's having to do with that. At some point, that will have its own website as well. I'm currently in the process of putting the board of directors together, the real one. I put one together, but just to get it through. And now I'm actually got a co-founder that's taking over part of it. She's going to be the one part of it. I'm the media other part of it. And so, like, we're working really hard to kind of put this thing together and try to roll it out and get everything going with it. So those are the best places to find me. Nowhere to go but up is the podcast. It's available as a live stream as well as a audio only on the podcast platforms. And so you can, YouTube, and like I said, anywhere on that link tree, go in there and you can find all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll put that in the show notes too, so people have a link to that as well. What are your last words for the audience?
If you have a male in your life that is struggling and going through some of these things, even if they're in incarceration, you can have them reach out to me. Like if you have somebody in your life that's incarcerated, he's a male and he's struggling with kind of, any of the things that I've talked about, he can write to me at PO Box 1450, Brentwood, California 94513. And I do mentor males as well. So, any way that I can help, let me know, because we need to start getting a better generation of guys out there that can start being leaders and role models in how to show up in a more meaningful, loving, caring, compassionate, and empathetic way. In their relationships, in life, in their jobs, anywhere that they need to be. I think that's the future going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. It's great. It's awesome. Thank you again. Thank you for this connection. It's been wonderful. And I really do sincerely hope we stay in touch. I think that the work that you do is noble work. And I'd love to continue to, support you any way I can. And again, I think it's great. Thanks for being here. I know that you provided a lot of hope and insight into so many things for the listeners today. I do appreciate that. Thanks again, Sean. And again, thanks again, listeners. Please do not forget to subscribe, to rate and review, to share these podcasts, because that's how we continue to get this word out, the word of hope, redemption, that tomorrow can be better than today when we get real and make the choices. And again, commit to that. So again, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Share it with others and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I've got a tribe over on Facebook, so head over there and search for Juggling the Chaos of Recovery Podcast Tribe. And do you know somebody who has a story to share, a story of recovery and hope? Please let me know, as I'd love to feature them as a guest on one of these next upcoming podcasts. And perhaps you're looking for a community of like-minded, collaborative, and supportive people who cheer each other on as we strive to improve our lives. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, schedule some time with me. You'll find the links in the show notes. Let's talk, and let me help you find your way. And I'm here to tell you that you're worth it.